Back a few years ago, a number of years ago, back about 1976 and 77, we started having meetings in such as this in the Holiday Inn Convention Center back in Billings, Montana, where I come from. And we had run a TV special, and we had a very nice crowd that showed up the next night at a meeting there in that convention center. We had about 450 people. And of course, I was teaching the jury principle and the function of the jury. But that night I got up there and introduced myself to that crowd, and I said something that I thought at the moment was rather funny. I said, I want to welcome all of you IRS agents that are here. At that point in time, we had IRS agents that attended most of our meetings. And I said, I want to welcome all you IRS agents that are here. And of course, today, right here now, if we have an IRS agent here, I want to welcome you here. But back there, I made a mistake. I said, I'm glad to have you here, but we can't guarantee your safety. There were about 450 people there, and there were three fellows in the audience that jumped up like they'd set on attack or something and ran out the door. Everybody laughed. I mean, those fellows gave themselves away. I like to have IRS agents in our audiences, and I like to have U.S. attorneys, and I don't know if I've ever had a federal judge, but I would hope so. I do know that we ran a one-hour TV special back in New Hampshire. It cost me $7,000 to run that one-hour TV special in Manchester, New Hampshire, back in about February of 1984. We ran that program, a one-hour TV special, and we titled it Hope for America. We didn't get too much response from that program, but I got one letter that made it all worthwhile. I got a letter from one of the justices of the Supreme Court for the state of New Hampshire on the Supreme Court stationery, and he said this. He says, I watched your TV special, and he said, I want you to know that I agree that you are 100% right in what you're saying. That made it all worthwhile. You see, that $7,000, I was investing in my country. I wasn't investing in a criminal government. I was investing in my country because I am convinced that my grandchildren will get a much better return on that kind of an investment than if I were to have bought stocks or bonds or whatever and pass those on to my heirs when I die. I am interested in making an investment that will pay off in the future. And I do not believe that I can invest any better than investing in the process of informing my fellow Americans. Now, I have some questions here that you folks have put out here. You've been writing these in the last hour, hour and a half, and I am not going to be able to address them all. But I'm going to address the ones that I think are most important and the ones that will go with what I have been saying here today. The first question is this. Can you explain how the grand jury is seated? Who picks the members? That is a very good question, a very vital question. We know that we have a criminal system out there in the Justice Department and the federal judges. They are manipulating the thing at times. We know that. We have a question in here telling about how the U.S. attorney fired the foreman of a grand jury here in this area because apparently he was not working with the U.S. attorney. He was working for the country rather than for the government. That question is in here too. but I want to address this, how the grand jury is supposedly, or it is supposed to be picked. The federal grand jury is to be picked from the voter registration list, the same process as they use to pick the juries for the petit juries, the criminal trials, the civil trials. They're supposed to pick them by lot. However, we know in some places in this country they have manipulated this, and in other places they have followed the law. In Montana, back about 1979 or 80, I was talking to the U.S. attorney, and he told me, he said, Red, he says, we have held the last federal grand jury over an additional 6 months because we were afraid we would get a tax protester on the next grand jury. That's one of the things that they are doing. That kind of mischief will continue until we get grand juries informed. People on those grand juries, like the grand jury foreman that was fired here by the U.S. attorney. If the rest of that grand jury had been functioning properly, they would have immediately called in the U.S. attorney. When the U.S. attorney tried to fire the foreman, the rest of the grand jury should have immediately called in the U.S. attorney, put him under oath, and questioned him as to his authority. Where did he get the authority to fire the foreman of the grand jury? You know what would have happened if they had been informed and known? The U.S. attorney would have been charged with the felony. You see, he doesn't have that authority. You remember now? Where is the authority? Is it above? Yes. It is above the U.S. attorney. The grand jury has the authority, not the U.S. attorney. We had a federal grand jury in Salt Lake that handed down some indictments against the Federal Reserve Bank system back a few years ago. They did not understand their position properly. When the U.S. attorney dismissed their first indictment, they should have indicted the U.S. attorney. Obstruction of justice. When the judge dismissed their second indictment, they should have indicted him. The grand jury's up here, the judge is down here. What does that mean? It's just like the grand jury here, they're bird colonels in the military. And the judge is some kind of a corporal or a sergeant down here. Now, who has control? Who is in command? If you are in the military and if you had a corporal with an IQ of 80, and I think most of us have seen a few of them, if you had a corporal with an IQ of 80 and you had 1,000,000 privates and all of them had an IQ averaging 130, who would be in command? Not the smartest ones, not the million out there, the majority, no. Because there is an order of authority, there is a chain of command in the military. And it is there so that there is a discipline in the system. And that corporal with his 80 IQ is in command. I know we have former military people here, and you understand exactly what I'm saying. The grand jury is up here. They should not be taking any guff off of these people down here. Back several years ago, they had a special grand jury impaneled in Salt Lake City, Utah, and they had 7 notorious high-profile tax protesters from the West, I was not one of them, that they had targeted. And they spent tax dollars like they were going out of style. They subpoenaed witnesses from all over the United States. A young fellow came out to my house. He said, I've got this subpoena. I have to go to Salt Lake and appear before the grand jury. He was, he was at a loss. He was frightened. He was intimidated. He didn't know what to expect. And so I sat him down and explained the facts of life to him. I said, They don't want you. They're after somebody else.